I'm next to Jake. Yay.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. So like I said, we're going to talk about growth today within the Solana ecosystem. I'm super excited about this conversation, including the pivot, just because I found that even working in growth, it's kind of become a catch-all term and can have very different definitions based on your perspective and your company that you're working at. And what I'm most excited about with this panel is we have 3 panelists who are kind of coming at this growth problem from their different perspectives. So next to me is Maurice, who kind of represents the grassroots growth, like he talked about, from communities to wallets, DAOs, everything in between, really like the hands-on work of bringing new users on chain. Justin on the end more represents institutional side of things, institutional growth, whether it be scaling treasuries, attracting Solana staked delegation, and really building the infrastructure to bring in new players to the ecosystem. Finally, we have Samara, who brings more the utility and integration perspective, especially from the security side. And she has a really unique perspective around what it looks like building towards growth and getting into the Solana ecosystem and what that looks like. And then finally, in my own work at XP, I've kind of been able to feel both sides of it, whether it be the retail side or the institution side, in terms of the grind of trying to drive user adoption, but then also kind of being able to go along with the tailwinds of more larger shifts such as stablecoin adoption or bigger apps coming into the ecosystem like PayPal and Venmo. So to get started and kick it off, I'd love to ask each of our panelists to kind of give a quick intro and then also just how they define growth within their position. So Maurice, if you want to kick us off, kind of when you think about growth, what does that mean for you at Solflare?
Sure. And did you want a little intro?
And a little intro, please.
Yeah, sweet.
Thank you.
So if you were in the room 40 minutes ago or 30 minutes ago, you heard some of my story. But I've been around Bitcoin since 2011 and 12. I've been actively invested or using crypto to fix my financial situation since 2016, 17. I've been full-time Solana ecosystem since Q1 2021. I've consulted, advised. I worked with Monkey DAO. I was head of growth for Lulo. And today I am content lead at Solflare, which I actually wear a few hats. And growth for us is quite interesting. And I think growth in Web3 is a bit of a not a lost art, but it's definitely a unique thing that encompasses marketing, BD, comms, branding, community building, right? Unlike other industries, crypto has community, and it's a big piece of the puzzle. So for me and Solflare, growth looks like grassroots outreach. We have spaces, we have workshops, we have our Discord community. We have affiliate badges on Twitter. We have events like this where we go and we talk and we try to network and meet people. We sponsor events. We sponsor hackathons. I mean, I could keep going, but I think I should leave some time for the other panelists.
Great, thank you. And then we can jump to Samara. So I know you're coming from kind of an outside perspective building into Solana. How do you define growth from your position? And as well, could you please give us a little bit of an intro?
Yes, happy to. So I am Samara, head of growth at Cantina, which is a security solutions platform. We do everything from traditional audits to bug bounties, incident response, pretty much anything security related across Web 2, Web 3, every single ecosystem. Little intro about me. I have been working in the space since I think late 2017, originally came at it from a gaming point of view, like blockchain gaming point of view, and then made a concerted decision to pivot onto the utility side. So did tax for a couple of years, that melted my soul, and then I went into security, and here we are today. In terms of what growth looks like at Cantina, so I would say there's kind of 4 pieces to the puzzle, and I will try to fly through them. So the first is kind of the ideological side, like helping everyone understand what it means to be secure. Obviously minimizing as many hacks as possible, sorry. And from a growth perspective, so our founders came out of the gates really strong. They were at the Ethereum Foundation, so we started with a very strong foundation in that ecosystem. So our mission over the past year and a half, 2 years since Cantina began is taking that level of like perceived excellence and translating that to other ecosystems like Solana. Because we have a network of over 6,000 absolutely cracked security researchers that are the best at what they do. So applying that and reaching that same level of trust in new ecosystems. And then the third piece, I think I'm up to number 3, is the institutional side. So security, we come at it from like a cool angle in that we can be this kind of trusted voice between both sides of the fence. We can facilitate the conversations between the institutions and Web3 from like a kind of impartial third-party point of view. So there's growth in that direction as well. And then the fourth one is the researcher community, as you mentioned. Like it is, we wouldn't exist without it because that is what makes our platform so strong. We can pull on an expert from any niche in any ecosystem and give projects exactly what they need. So growing them, educating them, helping them get better at what they're already great at.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then finally, Justin, from the kind of institutional angle, how would you say you define growth for Sol Strategies?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Jake, and look forward to the panel here. Just quick background on myself, for better or worse, come from TradFi, right? So you can pass judgment, and you can see by the uniform I'm wearing. I think that's probably pretty indicative of that.
The best.
I think that does, or has allowed me to bring a perspective where I saw how things used to work, and I can see how things should work and could work in the future. And so that's what initially attracted me to the space after spending far too much of my career focused on the legacy way of doing things. I just joined Sol Strategies a couple weeks ago, so relatively new to the position as head of growth. We are one of the premier technology infrastructure providers focused on the Solana ecosystem, primarily our validator solutions, which we can go more into what we do and how we do it. Also worth noting that as of this past week, we are publicly listed on the NASDAQ. We had previously been traded on a Canadian exchange under a different name, actually as one of the OG DATs from the 2018 timeframe. Pivoted purely to focus on Solana about a year ago, and as of this past Monday, received approval to list on NASDAQ. And I think what's interesting about that, and appreciate the sentiment, is that's a very different path than folks sort of buying into an existing company that's already listed. We actually had to go through the approval process to get listed on sort of the world's premier security exchange. And so that's a big boon to blockchain in general, but I think specifically to what we're all trying to build here in Solana. So pretty cool to be part of that. To quickly touch on growth though, for me, I sort of have 3 different views of that in order of how explicit the goals may be. First and foremost, as a publicly traded company, we do have targets, we have metrics we need to hit every quarter. That is what it is. That's sort of just part of the game there. Second order from there, and this is where I think about my personal goals, how do I attract as much delegated stake to our platform, providing best-in-class APYs, highest quality infrastructure, and then building sort of a product suite above and beyond that, if you think of just concentric circles. And then third, in some ways most relevant to what we're all doing here, just ecosystem, community. How do we be good stewards of the stake that we hold, of our treasury, and just of everything that we're trying to do. So love being up here, love seeing the energy, and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you all for those awesome intros. So this is great. Like I said, we've got a little bit of the grassroots adoption side of it, institutional capital, and then also these integrations and infrastructures to really bring in new projects to the ecosystem. What I want to dive into next is a little bit more about really the specific strategies and tactics that you guys have found successful working in growth so far. We can start with Maurice again. I know you touched on it a little bit already, but obviously you had a lot of success growing Lulo to start, whether it was the Twitter account to thousands of followers, and also jumping over to scaling DAOs, now working at Solflare. What sort of strategies, I guess, have you seen translate best to really capturing that lasting adoption?
Yeah, so for me, and this is something that I've been pretty adamant about for the last 2 or 3 years, is human-powered marketing, human-powered brand building, people react better to people than they do to a piece of marketing material. So that's how we did. That's how I did it at Lulo. That's how I did it with Monkey DAO, and that's how I'm translating it here with Solflare. And what that kind of looks like, I guess, in practice is not necessarily telling people what they need, but telling people how your product will help them, or showing them how your product will help them, actually hand-holding if you have to. And I think like there's a very big piece of Web3 that misses this human element, where there's a lot of these complicated protocols and financial products, and they can get really lost in the sauce when at the end of the day people just kind of want to know, like, how does this benefit me? How does this make my life easier or better? Or, you know, how do I reduce, you know, my stress as a result? So that's really like the crux of it. You know, you could go into way more detail, but at the end of the day, like, human powered marketing is the key to the growth. And then one other thing I would say is this win, help, win, rising tide lifts all boats mentality, where collaborating with other projects is looked at in a super positive light, not cannibalistic, not competitive or predatory, but really like, if we all win, like if we all grow the pie, we are all gonna win. I'd rather have a tiny piece of this massive pie than just a big piece of a tiny little thing. So I think, you know, that's where I'll leave it for now. I could keep going, but, you know.
No, that makes total sense and is super valuable. Maurice is one of my favorite follows on Twitter and is constantly dominating in that space. So jumping over to Justin, more on the kind of institutional side of things, and you mentioned earlier these targets that you have to hit being a publicly traded company. What has been, in your opinion, the most effective? I know you can speak to it either at Soul Strategies or prior positions in doing that.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to sort of meet the person you're selling to or pitching to or whatever. Meet them where they are in their journey.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
And even at the institutional level, I mean, you still have folks who are incredibly early or they're incredibly mature, right? And not dissimilar from folks on the personal side as well. And so, you know, before you even go in to have a conversation about whatever it is you're trying to sell or pitch, just, you know, understand where they are, like show a little bit of that empathy so that you understand what's important to them at this point in time, what are their priorities, what are their problems, and how can you help solve them, right? That's sort of the warm and fuzzy initial part of it, right? And then to touch more on the institutional side, at the end, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of folks are making decisions just based purely on economics, right? You know, how is this going to generate more revenue? How is this going to generate more yield? How is this going to help me save money, particularly versus the legacy way of doing things, right? And so at some point in the conversation, again, on the institutional side, the focus does shift from, okay, let me help you understand what this is and how we do it and why this is important for the future, et cetera, to, okay, if you're going to make a purchase decision, which is what ultimately folks need to make at the end of the day, or something similar, you know, how is this going to benefit them? Like, what is it going to do to their top or bottom line? Because ultimately they have to go back and justify it likely to someone else as to why they're changing up the way of doing things. So, you know, just to, I guess, recap, understand where they are, you know, and then after that initial pitch, make it worth their while, I guess, for whatever risk they're taking by betting on you.
Yep. Yeah, that makes total sense. And building off the idea of like meeting the customer or the user where they are, pivoting over to Samara, I think you have to deal with it kind of from both sides. You have the unique angle of being more retail focused and institutional focused, and I'm sure that brings unique challenges in itself. But then on top of it, like we mentioned earlier, you guys are kind of making this push into Solana where it's, I think, from my perspective and a general perspective, like when we think of growth, it's reaching out to these people outside of the Web3 ecosystem, outside of crypto, who might not know of it. But you're also dealing with the challenge of just reaching into a new ecosystem within crypto. So if you could speak on either of those, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think, like, in a nutshell, what both of these guys said is, like, you stole my answers, basically. Like, it's a combination of taking, and I think this is what separates, like, good marketing people from, you know, just marketing people. Taking the time and making the effort to genuinely understand the people that you're trying to reach, whether that, it can be completely regardless of who the audience is, whether it's institutions, whether it's us trying to break into Solana, just taking the time, making the effort of like reverse engineering the psychology of what do they need, especially if they don't realize that they need it yet. How do you make them understand that that is a need that you can fulfill that no one else can? What makes your company different in achieving that? And literally the phrase "meet them where they're at," like physically meet them where they're at, like today, or like it can be in terms of how you phrase things from like a content tone point of view, speak how they speak, and enjoy like learning that part of the process. I think without that, it comes across as like, as you said, kind of like deadened feeling marketing fodder that doesn't really do anything to anyone's emotions. And at the end of the day, we're
So there's a lost art of empathy when it comes to what we're trying to do here.
Amen.
It's and you know, folks may agree or disagree, but there's certainly a lot of like if you build it, you know, we expect them to come in this market where you get a lot of folks building it where like you still have to question why. Like why does this need to exist either in the world in general or specifically in blockchain or Solana? And so, I mean, as part of my first couple weeks at my role, I just spent a lot of time listening and learning. Like what do people care about? What are the problems they're facing? And how expensive are those problems? Because the bigger the dollars are, the bigger the problem, and how can we help them solve it?
Can I just one thing that I it's so refreshing to hear other people talk about meeting people where they're at, because for the last 6-7 years in crypto, it's been bridge the gap. And at the end of the day, you can't bridge a gap if someone doesn't even understand what it is that you're trying to tell them or trying to
force
sell
them across the
Yeah,
bridge.
you can't force them across the bridge. So I've been iterating on this for a few years now, and it's just so lovely to hear it from other people before I get to say it too. So
Even the institutional guys, right? I mean,
yeah, and the other, like, one more thing I would say is like that's a beautiful example of meeting people where they're at. Like there are hundreds of thousands of people that want exposure, millions of people, I don't know, the whole world that wants exposure to products that like I feel comfortable buying and selling on chain, but as a family office might not feel comfortable, and they need a conduit like Soul Strategies. I was recently with one of your competitors, DFDV, and we were doing the NASDAQ closing bell ringing, and like it was such a moment for me because it came full circle where TradFi had ruined my financial standing. I used crypto to rectify it, but I have to be a part of the traditional system to function in society. And being there for that was like this huge aha moment where we were meeting people where they were at, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great. And perfect segue into kind of the next thing I was curious about. A lot of what you're touching on is these complementary aspects to the different growth strategies that each of you are working on. But I'm sure there are also aspects of each of your strategies that may be a little bit competing in ways, whether it be for attention and resources or more so just like the idea that you're trying to get push across. Something like, I don't know, I'm sure Fartcoin doubling in price is great for Solflare in terms of on-chain activity and people using the wallet and all things like that, onboarding retail, whereas I'm sure it's not as great of a conversation to be having with the institutions.
If you convince them that any on-chain activity is good because our validators need to validate more, that's great. When you have to explain to them what exactly a Fartcoin is, that's a different story. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
Just air, dude.
Yeah. But I guess building off, it's just air, dude. But I guess building off that, do you see all these things as generally more complementary, or are you having to kind of deal with these things in more of a competing way on a daily basis? Kind of open that up to the floor. Whoever might want.
But my super quick response is
Yeah.
just for us, given that our core business is validating or validator solutions. Largely what's good for Solana is good for us, right? Because the more activity, the more transactions, the more that we have to do, the more the revenue that we generate, the more that benefits all of our stakeholders, et cetera. So that's sort of overarching theme for us. More activity is just better for our core business.
I think from our point of view, again, we're kind of in a privileged position in terms of like the more that is happening on any ecosystem, from a purely business perspective, that means more opportunity for us, more opportunity for our research community, and it is like we have skin in the game to make sure that that goes as well as it can go for everyone because it's a reflection of us. So more than I can express with words, there is skin in the game.
If I could just ask, how much correlation do you see, for instance, Solana, as more transactions, more things are happening from a security perspective? Is it linear for the correlation as far as more that's going on, the more work you guys have to do, unfortunately? Or how does that typically play out?
Oh, that's a good question.
'Cause growth for you is good for you. It may not be good for the folks who have been affected underneath, right?
Yeah, so growth for Cantina as a company, I would say, is defined by the stuff that we get to prevent before it becomes an issue, right? So that, to answer your question, I think it doesn't I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for us to be growing in an ecosystem. It's a reflection, in my opinion, of how much building is happening. As you said, how much activity is happening on chain. There's not really a correlation there, but more just what the builders are doing, how much they're shipping, and issues happening, there's been more activity on our side because more people are shipping stuff, so there's a correlation on that side, yeah.
I would add that, oddly enough, we wouldn't see Sol Strategies as a competitor. And as a matter of fact, DFDV is a partner for Solflare. We're their official Solana wallet. And I think, again, just echoing back to what we were saying before, rising tide lifts all boats. The more activity there is on chain, the more people talking about Solana, the more people staking Sol, whether it's through Solflare wallet and having self-custody, or whether it's through an institutional avenue, it's all good for me. And for Solflare, I think we're hyper focused on just growth of Solana. We're all in on Solana. You could see Phantom and Backpack and the other, the legacy Solana wallets, they've all branched out into other ecosystems, and I think cannibalized their communities and cannibalized their opportunities a bit, whereas we doubled down on Solana. And when the bear market hit and when things weren't looking so hot, we just built more. And we just doubled down on the tech, and the result is we're now, at the forefront of everything. We're at the forefront of everything wallet-based on Solana.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And overall, this idea of growing the pie, rising tide lifts all boats, really makes a lot of sense given how big Solana feels, but also at the same time, in the greater scheme of things, how small it is. On the flip side of this, though, I guess all of that sounds great when it works in sync, but I'm sure there are tons of times where you have in your past, whether at the current company or prior companies working in growth, come against something that has really been kind of stopping all these ideas from actually going through. So I'd be super interested as people who are experts in growth, what do you see as kind of the hardest part currently of driving growth for each of you and the growth of Solana, and maybe some insight into, for people who aren't working in growth and maybe are more focused on the tech side or whatever they might be within the ecosystem, how they can almost, from your perspective, help push Solana forward.
Yeah, I could take that one first. So I think 2 or 3 issues. One that is so simple and obvious is runway. If your company doesn't have a lot of runway, the first thing that gets cut is marketing, and marketing is the #1 growth driver in crypto. If you're not marketing, i.e. using Twitter and blogs or emails or Reddit or Instagram, whatever platforms you distribute your marketing on, if you don't have a budget, then kind of SOL. And the other thing I would say is people that are tapped in, so a lot of companies come into Solana thinking that they can just, come from ETH or come from Cosmo or come from wherever, and not tap into the community and not have someone that was established already, or not have someone that is in the community. And I think that's a big piece that people miss. And I think a lot of really cool products that have a lot of potential fail because they either don't try the human-powered marketing bit, or they don't give marketing and growth its attention that it deserves, or they don't get someone to tap in, or all three. And I've seen all three, and I've experienced all three personally, working for different companies. So yeah.
I think from my side specifically with Solana, so in Cantina, I think we're maybe 7,000 researchers, and within that cohort, there are some of the best Solana security researchers like on the planet, in the universe, whatever the definition might be. And the hardest part for me is, I think I mentioned before, we came out of the gate super strong in Ethereum, and this is the different perspective you were speaking to before, but you guys are a very tight-knit group, and breaking into that, even with that talent who have spent years kind of honing their skills, is it takes time, it takes effort, and from a growth perspective, like explaining that it takes time and takes effort when it's been so easy in other ecosystems is, that's been a hurdle, speed bump, slow down, yeah.
So at least from 21 to 23 or 24, and not so much recently, but the motto is like move fast, break shit. And with that came a lot of, trials and tribulations and failures and attempts. But, the ETH and other ecosystem philosophies and ethos and like approaches are a lot slower, a lot more dogmatic, a lot more philosophical. Whereas on Solana, it's like, what does this do? What problem does it solve? If it doesn't solve that problem, keep it fucking moving. And I think that's something people miss a lot, and I think that's part of why I love Solana.
And I think within that, there is maybe like a legacy understanding of what security looks like, and maybe an understanding that it can't fit into that pace. But we, like our founders, all of our researchers, they have lived and breathed in Solana, in Ethereum, in all of the ecosystems. They understand that, and they like work with that in mind, because again, like we've got skin in the game, they've got skin in the game. It's in everyone's best interest to move at the pace that suits the particular ecosystem.
And just one last note, to actually call out something that has not been as much of an impediment as in years past, regulation, right? And I think as we were sitting here a year ago, that may have been the top answer to that question from a lot of folks.
It was, and I was on a panel, and we were talking about that.
Yeah,
we were talking about the one thing we need is some clarity of any kind.
And fast forward, here we are, right? And I think maybe more related to my perspective in working with highly regulated institutions, the level of clarity this year compared to last year is just, it's night and day. And I think that's lost, can get lost in a lot of folks, where if things didn't go a certain way, we could be having a very different sentiment here this year across the crypto landscape, not only related to Solana. So I just think that we all, should be thankful that there's been some sensible regulation put in place, and it's only the start of a process, right? Because I think, starting with the folks I have to deal with and trickling all the way down to what you all deal with, it's a net positive step tremendously in the right direction. And so I'm just happy we don't have to talk about regulation on every single panel this year. So
yeah, shout out Solana Policy Institute.
Yes, thank you. Foundation. Way to go, guys.
Yeah, GG.
Awesome. So want to definitely leave some time for Q&A at the end, but one last question for the three of you. Interested in kind of 1 year from now, what would be the milestone you'd say that would really make you say that you feel as though your company had won on growth and what you were doing was effective? Justin, I'd love to start with you, just because obviously there's been a lot change for you and getting listed, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes coming up. So
yeah, absolutely, and I'll be somewhat sensitive to what I can say just from a public declaration perspective, goals and things we have in mind. I think starting at a more macro level, and keep me honest on the stats, folks, but if I'm not mistaken, only about 2/3 of Sol is actually staked today, and only about 10% of either that or the total amount is actually liquid staked. And so there's still so much opportunity, just greenfield, blue ocean, to get folks, and I'm now kind of bringing it all back to staking, I apologize, but to get folks involved with staking, to get folks involved with LSTs, and just to play a role in the future security and growth of the network, right? And so from a macro perspective and for our company, seeing those stats continue to increase from a community perspective, I think is going to be great, and I think will bode well for the future. And then, for us specifically at the company, accumulating, sort of that I alluded to earlier, accumulating as much delegated SOL as we can to run through our validator operations, which provide incredibly high APYs, incredibly high levels of security, not only to folks at the most world-class of institutions that happen to hold SOL, but at the other end of the spectrum, we also have a mobile app that's focused on the retail user, right? And so we want to provide that same level of performance, whether you're at one end of the spectrum or the other. And that's really our goal for the next 12, 24, 36 months.
Sure. And not to mention that all that SOL staked adds to the security of the network, which is something that people really miss. So I've only been with Solflare for my 3-month review is next week.
Good luck.
Thank you. I think I'm going to keep the job. Growth or success a year from now is going to look a little bit like what I was talking about during my talk, which is like a neobank on crypto rails. We have the own, earn, spend in the process. Our card will come out this month for EU and UK, ideally US early next year. And for me, success will be just constant compounding growth of our metrics. So more users, more value held in the wallets, more people using the features that we have. But I think at the end of the day, it's grow the pie, man. I mean, just to keep it simple, because I'd rather have the founders of Solflare give the real growth goals. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just grow the pie, get more people in, help more people achieve financial independence and financial security, especially in emerging markets where crypto is a lifeline, unlike in the West where we have much better access. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Thanks.
I feel like pie after this panel. I think from my perspective, what success in growth would look like 12 months from now would be, I think you can tell that I'm very bullish on the security researchers' capabilities on Cantina.
6,000 of them.
They're incredible, and there's they range in age. I've met 16-year-olds that are just absolutely insane at what they do. Anyway, I digress. I think what success in growth would look like for Cantina is those experts getting that perceived expertise, recognition, however you want to word it, in Solana, because from a more aspirational ecosystem-wide point of view, I know that will be a positive contribution to the ecosystem and its security as a whole. So personal bias, that will make me feel great. It'll make them feel great, and I think it'll benefit the ecosystem as a whole. So that's the dream.
I definitely, I would love to see that too, because I think in the ETH ecosystem, research is just king. And on Solana, building is king, and we need both.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to end it, and I appreciate you all three of you, your flexibility in changing the topic a little bit. But I'd love to open the floor for any questions we might have.
Andrew? Sorry, I know him pretty well.
Thanks so much for what you guys talked about, first of all. And then second of all, I think one thing when it comes to growth is we have this kind of looming monster of AI coming in. And so I'm kind of wondering your guys' perspective on what is going to be its impact over the next few years on what you guys are trying to do with growing your own protocols. And I guess as an ecosystem, we kind of are already seeing that in vibe coding, as it's called now. But that's the development side. So I guess on the growth side, where do you guys see it, and what do you guys expect from it over the next few years?
I'd love to jump in on this one. I think, and I'm not going to give a straight answer because my brain is going to go in both sides of the coin, but from one perspective, half of my brain says going back to what we were all saying about meeting them where they're at and understanding like their human needs and their human values. Half of my brain thinks that that can't be replicated to the degree that someone who has honed their skills at doing so can achieve. The other half of my brain disagrees because you see stories of people like they're doing therapy with ChatGPT now. Like, how, if that can be achieved to that level, what's to say the marketing psychology side of things can't be?
That scares me.
It's terrifying. I'm terrified.
I could piggyback a little bit. So with regards to like marketing, BD, comms, that side of growth, like we use AI all the time as a tool. I would encourage everyone to collaborate with AI. Don't use AI.
Ask it nicely.
And but on that note, and you'll see this with Solflare's marketing, like the more AI slop I see, the less I want to use it in our own marketing. And I think a big piece of, again, kind of going back to human-powered marketing, there has to be a degree of separation between like how much AI you use and how much it is seen in your growth or in your marketing and comms. Relating to product though, and growth in product, because again, like growth is multifaceted and it's not simply like marketing, BD, comms, it's also like the product itself. AI is going to be a massive tool, and I think any team that is not looking to leverage AI is going to fall behind. I can't say much beyond that. We are looking into it, and we have something cool that we are trying to think about and explore. But I just see it as another, tool in the repertoire. Yeah. Cool.
So this is maybe more of a product question, but we're looking at three primary users. We're looking at, retail, institutions, and then probably agentic AI as like the three primary kind of users of any of these platforms. Of those three verticals, what do you see the bulk of the volume and the bulk of the, not necessarily marketing efforts, but kind of engineering towards the experience going toward?
Yeah, I'll answer quickly because I think it's probably most self-evident. A lot of my personal efforts and then a lot of our efforts as a company are focused more on that institutional audience, whatever your definition of institutional may be. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have a retail-focused offering. I think that's complementary to our ultimate goal of being an institutional-grade staking platform for institutions, other publicly traded companies, large asset managers, et cetera. So that's where I will be spending a lot of my time, thinking about those large, more strategic type relationships. But again, that's specific to our company and my role.
I can go. Okay. So in my opinion, agentic, commerce is yet to be actually, like, I haven't seen it actually play out. I have a bunch of friends that had, agentic AI companies on Solana, like Graphane, if you're familiar. And it didn't exactly work as planned. And like, I have the bot and I can't get it to do what I want. I think retail is incredibly important, but I'm going to kind of be a little contrarian here, and I'm going to say institutions, I think, are going to be the most important for broader mass adoption, because when the institutions are accepting it and the institutions are adopting it, then retail kind of has like a pass, right? Until now, it's been the other way around.
Sorry, just to quickly
Please.
add to that, I mean, even when you think about institutions, not every single one, but a lot of them, whose capital do they ultimately hold?
Yes.
And it's retail type individuals, right? So if you think of a large asset manager that may be looking to allocate to Solana, where is their capital coming from? It could be coming from pension plans, right? Ultimately, securing someone's retirement funds. And so, there is that second and third level exposure kind of piercing through the institutional veil down to the actual retail level where it may not be as clear cut, where there could be sort of multifaceted types of arrangements.
Now, one follow-up comment, and I think because we're in Boston in the United States, we're missing a big component of crypto, which is emerging markets, where crypto is the only opportunity to escape devaluing currency, to get banking opportunities, to be able to send money, cross borders, remittances and whatnot. So I actually think like retail to a degree in emerging markets is the big mover and shaker. But in the West, it's going to have to be institutions. I know we have a massive, massive user base in Nigeria, where the naira is, constantly fluctuating. We have a huge user base in Southeast Asia. We have a user base in LATAM, and I'm pretty adamant about getting deeper in there. So, I just wanted to add that little sprinkle of something.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up our time. You can find any of us after this, but thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.